Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, leaders and visionaries, let me begin with a principle. The most powerful gift God ever gave humanity is the mind. Not your job, not your house, not even your body. It is the mind that defines the man, not the muscles. You are not what you wear. You are what you think. The mind is the center of life. The mind is the manufacturer of destiny. The mind is the womb of purpose. Whatever controls your mind controls your life. Now hear this carefully. If you do not take control of your mind, someone else will, and in most cases they already have. Governments are after your mind. Corporations are after your mind. The media is after your mind. The enemy is after your mind. They don't need your body, they just need your agreement. If they get your thoughts, they've already won your future. The mind is the battleground of spiritual warfare. The war is not in your bank account. The war is not in your neighborhood. The real war is between your ears. That's why the enemy doesn't attack your hands, he attacks your thoughts. He doesn't steal your clothes, he steals your confidence. He doesn't need your house, he needs your habits. Let me tell you this, every thought is a seed, and whatever you plant in the soil of the mind will grow in the garden of your behavior. So, if you're careless with what you think, you'll be confused by what you become. You don't need chains on your body to be a slave. All you need is a locked mind. And that's why mental slavery is more dangerous than physical slavery. Because you can free a man from a prison, but if he still thinks like a prisoner, he will go back. So I ask you today, who owns your mind? Is it your past? Or is it popular opinion? Is it television? Is it culture? Or is it truth? Let me say something radical. You were not born to fit in. You were born to take dominion. But you cannot rule your environment until you first rule your mind. The Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That means change begins in the mind. Not in the government, not in the economy, not in your paycheck. The key to transformation is not motivation, it is renovation. You don't need hype. You need a new mindset. Now listen to this. If you don't define your values, society will define them for you. If you don't program your mind with truth, someone will program it with lies. If you don't use your mind, they'll rent it out. And here's the most dangerous thing. The world doesn't need your permission to influence you. It only needs your attention. That's why you must guard your ears, guard your eyes, guard your conversations, guard what you entertain, because entertainment enters to detain your development. So what's the solution? The first law of leadership is mastering your own mind. Because before you lead others, you must lead yourself. Before you conquer your enemies, you must conquer your thoughts. Before you pursue purpose, you must evict distractions. Train your mind to think with discipline. Feed it truth. Challenge every lie. Reject every thought that weakens your spirit. Because whoever has your mind has your future. You are the landlord of your mind. Don't let squatters move in. Don't let fear pay rent. Don't let doubt decorate the place. Evict anything that does not belong in the palace of purpose. Take back your mind. Take back your peace. Take back your power. Because if you don't control your mind, Someone else will. The mind is the battlefield. It is the arena where every war is either won or lost before it ever shows up in your life. Before you fail in your business, you fail in your mind. Before you walk away from your calling, you walk away in your thoughts. Before you fall into temptation, you've already negotiated with it in your mind. Life does not begin externally, it begins internally. Every addiction, every bad habit, every broken relationship, every dream abandoned, these are not just surface issues. They are mental wars. And the enemy, whether spiritual or societal, understands that if he can dominate your thinking, he never has to fight your body. If he can get into your head, he doesn't need to bind your hands. Because your hands will follow wherever your thoughts lead. You see, every decision you make, every emotion you feel, every direction you take in life, it starts with a thought. And those thoughts are not neutral. They are weapons. Every thought you entertain is either building your future or breaking it. Either strengthening your spirit or sabotaging your destiny. That's why the most important battles you ever fight won't be in boardrooms or on battlefields. They'll be in your thought life. People look at behavior, but God looks at the mind. Why? Because behavior is just the echo of belief. You act based on what you truly believe in your mind, not what you say with your mouth. That's why you can say you're confident, but still sabotage every opportunity. Why you can say you want peace, but keep feeding your mind chaos. It's because the mind is still at war. And make no mistake, there are forces at play. The world is after your attention because attention is access. Advertisements don't just want your money, they want your mind. Political systems don't just want your vote, they want your loyalty. Culture doesn't just want to entertain you, it wants to educate you without your permission. That's why it is critical to recognize that your mind is not neutral territory. It is being fought over every single day. When you wake up in the morning, the war begins. Will you choose fear or faith? Will you choose vision or distraction? Will you choose discipline or comfort? The choice isn't always easy, but it is always yours. Because even though the mind is the battlefield, you still have the power to choose your weapons. And when you choose truth, discipline, focus, and purpose, you begin to win the war within. And when you win there, nothing outside of you can defeat you. Every thought is a seed. It may seem small, invisible, and insignificant at first, but it carries the potential to shape the entire landscape of your life. Just like a seed planted in the ground eventually produces a harvest, every thought planted in the mind eventually produces a result, whether you realize it or not. You cannot think negativity and expect a life filled with peace. You cannot entertain doubt and expect to walk in confidence. Thoughts are the beginning of everything. Your words, your emotions, your habits, your outcomes. Nothing in your life just happens. Everything is conceived first in thought. So if the seed is corrupt, the fruit will be bitter. Whatever you continually think about will grow stronger. The more you entertain a thought, the deeper its roots grow in your soul. Think on fear long enough, and fear will become your identity. Think on lack, and scarcity will become your mindset. But think on purpose, and you'll begin to walk with intention. Think on truth, and you'll develop unshakable clarity. You are not what people say about you. You are what you believe about yourself. And what you believe comes from the seeds you've allowed to take root. The danger is most people let others plant their thoughts for them. They let social media sow seeds of comparison. They let television sow seeds of confusion. They let wounded people plant seeds of bitterness. And over time, without even realizing it, they start reaping a harvest they never intended. A life full of frustration, a heart filled with anger, a mind clouded by fear. That's not random. That's the result of the wrong seeds being watered daily. So the question is not whether you're planting thoughts. The real question is, what kind of garden are you growing? What are you feeding your mind when no one is watching? What are you meditating on when you're alone? Because the harvest of your life will always reflect the quality of the seeds you've allowed in. You don't get oranges from apple seeds, and you don't get peace from planting worry. If you want to change your life, you must first change your thoughts. You must uproot what doesn't belong, starve the weeds, feed the fruit, and be intentional about what you allow to grow. Because every thought is a seed, and eventually every seed shows up in your life. Influence is always at work. Whether you're conscious of it or not, something or someone is shaping the way you think, feel, and respond. Influence doesn't take a break. It doesn't wait for your permission. It works in the background, silently, persistently, and often invisibly, guiding your decisions, steering your values, and constructing your worldview. You don't have to be in a classroom to be taught. Powerful influence is disruptive, feel entertaining. Every concept that you show up and see is acceptable. In what's unhealthy, seem acceptable. And what's destructive, feel entertaining. And that's why influence is not always loud, and oncoming is inefficient. It doesn't cost. It makes more easy. It's feelability that makes any. The human mind was designed to absorb, to reflect, and to imitate. That's why children become what they observe, not what they're told. And even as adults, we are still becoming what we continuously expose ourselves to. If you surround yourself with fearful people, fear becomes your lens. If you constantly engage with content that promotes chaos, your internal world will reflect that same instability. The atmosphere you keep becomes the environment your thoughts grow in. That's why influence must be guarded. Because whatever has your ear eventually has your mind. And whatever has your mind will have your life. The most dangerous influence is not the one that's obvious. It's the one that becomes familiar. Influence that feels normal is the kind that's hardest to resist. Because over time, it doesn't feel like influence anymore. It just feels like reality. The truth is, someone is always trying to shape how you think. It could be the culture pushing its agenda, the media repeating its narrative, the people around you imposing their expectations, or even your own past replaying its voice. That's why intentionality is not optional. It's essential. If you are not deliberately directing your mind, It will drift under the pressure of external influence. And when that happens, you begin living a life that wasn't even authored by you. You must decide what influences are allowed to stay. Not everything that is popular is healthy. Not every opinion deserves access to your convictions. Influence may be constant, but control over it is still your responsibility. Because if you don't choose your influences will choose you. And they won't ask for permission before rewriting your life. You become what you meditate on. What you allow to occupy your mind consistently, deliberately, and repeatedly will eventually shape who you are. Your habits, your emotions, your decisions, and even your destiny. Meditation is more than quiet reflection. It's focused repetition. It's the process of engraving ideas into your consciousness until they become part of your identity. The mind is like soil. Whatever you meditate on, you're watering. And what you water grows. Meditate on fear, and fear becomes your default reaction. Meditate on failure, and your confidence will shrink. Meditate on rejection, and soon you'll expect it, even in healthy situations. But meditate on truth, and you will begin to live boldly. Meditate on your purpose, and clarity will sharpen your steps. Meditation is not a passive act. It is a powerful builder of belief. The danger is that we are always meditating on something, whether we know it or not. Worry is meditation. It's just focused on the wrong thing. Resentment is meditation. It's just dwelling on the pain. Lust, envy, regret. These are all toxic meditations. They stay in your mind day after day, replaying scenarios, reinforcing patterns, and redefining how you see the world. And over time, they don't just stay in your mind, they change your nature. That's why transformation begins with intentional meditation. You can't change your life until you change what you think on day and night. It's not enough to hear truth once. It has to be rehearsed, spoken, declared, written down, and revisited again and again until it displaces the lies that have taken root. What becomes familiar in your mind will eventually become normal in your behavior. You cannot live above your dominant thoughts. If you want to change your identity, start with your meditation. Feed your mind the future you want to live in. Speak the promises that align with your values. Saturate your thoughts with a vision that matches your purpose. Because you will always reflect what you repeatedly return to. You don't become what you visit, you become what you dwell on. You don't grow into what you've heard, you grow into what you've embraced. And meditation is the process of becoming. So choose what you dwell on carefully. Because sooner or later, your life will mirror the focus of your mind. Ownership of your mind is your responsibility. No one else can think for you. No one else can control what you allow to settle in your heart. You may not be able to stop every thought from arriving, but you are fully responsible for what stays, what grows, and what shapes your life. The mind is a sacred space, and you are the gatekeeper. What you allow in, you are accountable for. Blaming others for your mindset is easy, but it's also powerless. People may influence you, but they can't take your authority unless you give it away. The media may flood you with opinions, but it can't form your convictions without your consent. Culture can shout its values, but it cannot force you to adopt them unless you surrender the control of your thinking. So undoubtedly, there's still, well, chronic. It is very complex. It is very incomplete. Culture can shout its values, but it's very incomplete. Control by your own responsibility means ownership. It means being intentional about what you read, what you watch, who you listen to, and how you process your experiences. You cannot live freely with a borrowed mind. A mind shaped entirely by external voices is a life headed in directions you never chose. If you do not take responsibility for your thinking, you will live out someone else's expectations, not your own purpose. Taking ownership means creating boundaries, mental, emotional, and spiritual. It means refusing to give room to bitterness, insecurity, jealousy, or fear. It means challenging thoughts that are inconsistent with your values and confronting beliefs that no longer serve your growth. It means renewing your mind daily, intentionally, consistently, so that your inner world reflects the kind of life you were created to live. You cannot control every situation, but you can control your response. You cannot dictate the opinions of others, but you can choose what thoughts you agree with. The greatest freedom is not in doing what you want. It's in thinking with clarity, truth, and purpose. Because until you own your mind, you will always be at the mercy of someone else's voice. Responsibility may sound heavy, but it's actually empowering. Because the moment you accept full responsibility for your mind, you take back your power to shape your identity, direct your focus, and walk in alignment with who you truly are. Your life will always rise or fall to the level of your thinking. And no one, not your past, not your pain, not your environment, can control your mind unless you let them. Undisciplined thinking breeds chaos. When the mind is left unchecked, untrained, and unfocused, it begins to drift, and that drift eventually turns into disorder. A wandering mind becomes a weak mind. It reacts instead of leads, confuses emotion for truth, and begins to build patterns that pull you away from stability and purpose. Without discipline, thoughts come and go without accountability, creating noise instead of clarity, fear instead of focus, and anxiety instead of peace. A person with an undisciplined mind will find it difficult to make consistent decisions, to follow through on goals, or to stay anchored in values. One day they are inspired, the next day they are discouraged. One moment they believe in their potential, the next they are buried in self-doubt. Not because life has changed, but because their thinking is ungoverned. When you don't discipline your thoughts, you become a prisoner to your moods, your environment, and the opinions of others. The mind is not meant to lead itself without structure. Just as a river without banks becomes a flood, a mind without order becomes overwhelmed. Discipline is what gives thoughts direction. It teaches the mind what to ignore and what to magnify. It silences the noise and strengthens your focus. Without it, even the smallest distractions can derail your purpose. You start majoring in minor things, obsessing over what doesn't matter and delaying what does. Chaos in your schedule, chaos in your relationships, chaos in your emotions, all of it can often be traced back to the lack of discipline in your thoughts. When your mind is scattered, your life will be scattered. Discipline brings alignment. It creates rhythm, consistency, and inner strength. It allows you to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from impulse. It empowers you to live by principle rather than pressure. No one drifts into clarity. You don't stumble into peace. You arrive there by intentional thought, repeated focus, and the choice to challenge everything that breeds confusion. Discipline is the tool that turns thoughts into strategy, emotions into strength, and chaos into order. Without it, the mind becomes a playground for distractions, lies, and self-sabotage. With it, the mind becomes a weapon, sharp, stable, and powerful. True freedom starts in the mind. You can change your surroundings, break out of toxic environments, or escape physical limitations. But if your mind is still captive, you're not truly free. A person can live in a free country and still be enslaved by fear, by insecurity, by guilt, by false beliefs. Because bondage is not just physical, it is mental, emotional, and spiritual. The most dangerous prison is the one you can't see, the one built by your own thoughts. Freedom is not just about removing external chains, it's about breaking internal patterns. You can't walk in liberty if your thoughts are still controlled by the past. You can't move forward if your mindset is still locked in what others said about you. A mind that is ruled by shame, fear, or failure will always resist progress, even when opportunity is present. That's why you can give a free person a cage and they'll find a way out. But give a captive mind a palace and they'll still live like a prisoner. Freedom begins the moment you take authority over what you believe. It starts when you reject lies that have shaped your identity and replace them with truth that aligns with your purpose. It starts when you stop allowing other people's opinions to define your value. It starts when you choose to think with discipline, with clarity, and with vision. Freedom is not the absence of rules. It's the presence of inner alignment. When your thoughts, beliefs, and actions flow from a place of truth, that's real freedom. Real freedom. You don't need permission to be free. You need revelation. The revelation that no matter where you've been or what you've gone through, your mind is still yours. You can choose what to believe. You can choose what to reject. You can rise above your limitations not by waiting for your circumstances to change, but by renewing your mind daily with truth, wisdom, and purpose. As long as your mind is dependent on approval, controlled by fear, or dictated by your past, freedom will feel like a distant dream. But once your thinking is aligned with truth, once you understand that no one can imprison your thoughts without your consent, you begin to experience a kind of freedom that no system, no critic, no failure can take from you. Because when the mind is free, the rest of your life will follow. Your vision determines your mental filter. The way you see your future influences how you interpret your present. Vision acts like a lens. It shapes how you process what happens to you, what you expect from life, and what you believe is possible. Without vision, your mind becomes vulnerable to distraction, confusion, and fear. But with vision, even setbacks are seen as setups. And challenges become part of the journey instead of reasons to quit. When you have a clear vision, your mind begins to filter information according to that goal. You don't waste time on what doesn't align. You stop entertaining conversations that pull you backward. You learn to ignore criticism that doesn't match your calling. Vision brings focus, and focus strengthens the mind. It trains you to see through the noise, to recognize what matters, and to dismiss what's irrelevant. But when vision is absent or blurred, the mind becomes scattered. Everything feels urgent. Every problem seems bigger than it is. Every delay feels like denial. Without vision, you start interpreting temporary discomfort as permanent failure. Your mental filter becomes reactive instead of purposeful. You start to believe lies that don't belong to you and entertain fears that have no place in your future. Vision protects the mind by giving it a direction. It tells your thoughts where to go and what to avoid. It acts like a compass in a storm. It doesn't stop the winds, but it keeps you from getting lost. And the clearer your vision, the more resilient your mind becomes. You stop being overwhelmed by circumstances because you are anchored in something greater than what you see today. Every great thinker, every purposeful leader, every person who changes their environment, they all have this one thing in common. They've trained their minds to serve their vision. Their thoughts are not random. Their focus is not easily broken. Because once your vision is in place, your mental filter begins to remove what doesn't belong. You no longer see just what is. You begin to see what could be. And that shift in perspective changes everything. Leaders think differently. They don't just react to life. They interpret it through the lens of purpose and responsibility. While most people wait to be told what to think, leaders take control of their thoughts and intentionally shape them to align with their vision. They understand that leadership doesn't begin with position or title. It begins in the mind. Before you can influence others, you must first govern yourself, and that begins with how you think. Leaders think strategically. They don't allow emotions to lead their decisions. They feel deeply, but they respond wisely. They see beyond the surface and ask deeper questions. Why? What's next? What's the impact? Where others see problems, leaders train their minds to search for patterns and possibilities. They do not allow failure to define them or fear to direct them. They know that every great achievement begins with a disciplined, focused mind. What separates a leader is not intellect alone, but clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of values, clarity of direction. That clarity comes from mental discipline, the ability to filter distractions, silence inner doubt, and fix their focus on what truly matters. They understand that their thoughts shape their influence. A cluttered mind produces a confused life, but a leader's mind is cultivated like a garden, pruned, intentional, and productive. Leaders also think long term. They do not get caught in the emotions of the moment. They understand that today's sacrifice is often tomorrow's legacy. Their thoughts are rooted in vision but grounded in wisdom. They don't think in terms of popularity, they think in terms of principle. That's why they can stand alone when needed, because they've already decided that integrity matters more than applause. And perhaps most importantly, leaders take responsibility for their thinking. They don't blame circumstances or wait for ideal conditions. They train their minds to remain steady in storms, clear under pressure, and humble in success. Because they know that leadership is not about control, it's about consistency. The thoughts you allow today will determine the influence you carry tomorrow. So leaders discipline their thinking because they know the mind is where leadership truly begins. Transformation requires mental renewal. Lasting change does not begin with behavior, it begins with belief. Until the mind is renewed, the patterns of the past will repeat themselves, even in new environments. You can change a job, move to a new city, enter a new relationship, or start a new project, but if your thinking remains the same, your results will eventually reflect your old mindset. True transformation is not about doing something different, it's about becoming someone different. And that process begins in the mind. Mental renewal is not a one-time decision, it is a daily discipline. It means confronting thought patterns that have been shaping your life without your permission. It means challenging assumptions that were formed by pain, disappointment, fear, or limitation. It means identifying lies, that once served as survival mechanisms but now sabotage your growth. Renewal requires honesty. It forces you to take inventory of what you've been thinking, who you've been listening to, and what you've allowed to define your identity. You cannot expect new outcomes while clinging to outdated thought systems. A renewed mind sees differently, thinks differently, responds differently. It looks at setbacks and sees lessons, not labels. It looks at failure and sees feedback, not finality. It looks at obstacles and sees opportunities for growth. Transformation is not the result of wishing. It is the fruit of replacing toxic thoughts with truth, fear with faith, confusion with clarity, and insecurity with identity. Mental renewal also requires intentional input. What you feed your mind becomes a framework for your life. If you constantly absorb negativity, your outlook will be dark. If you expose yourself to truth, wisdom, and purpose, your thinking will align with your highest potential. You don't overcome limiting beliefs by ignoring them. You overcome them by replacing them. Thought by thought, you pull down what doesn't belong and build up what leads you forward. Transformation is not just about change, it's about alignment. Alignment with your purpose, your calling, your values, and your creator. When your mind is renewed, your life begins to reflect who you really are, not who you were conditioned to be. That's when transformation becomes visible, not just in what you do, but in how you think, how you speak, how you show up. Because until the mind is made new, nothing else can truly be. Let me leave you with this final truth. Your life will never rise higher than your mindset. The battles you face, the destiny you carry, the legacy you leave, it all begins and ends in your mind. If you don't control it, someone else will. If you don't guide it, it will wander. If you don't renew it, it will decay under the weight of lies, fear, and distraction. But you were not created to live as a prisoner to your thoughts. You were designed to rule your mind, to steward it, to fill it with vision, truth, discipline, and purpose. The power to change your life is already within you. It's in the way you think, the way you see, the way you respond. You don't need to wait for a new year, a new job, or a new opportunity. You need a new mindset. So take back your authority. Guard your mind like it holds your future, because it does. Decide what thoughts deserve to stay. Replace confusion with clarity. Trade fear for focus. Dismantle every lie with truth. Because when your mind is free, your potential is limitless. When your mind is disciplined, your life becomes intentional. And when your mind is renewed, transformation is inevitable. Own your mind. Master your thoughts. Because if you don't, someone else will.